Welcome to Voice Talks. We're diving into the pulse of the voice ecosystem, featuring
James Poulter, Voice Importance for Brands.
Daniel Hill, Current and Future Trends in Voice.
Joti Balani, Changing of the Old Voice Guard to the New.
Kane Simms, The Future of Conversation Design.
Dr. Terry Fisher, Predicting the Future of Voice.
And I'm your host, Megan Grace. Let's talk voice. Welcome to Voice Talks. I'm your new host, Megan Grace. I'm thrilled to be hosting the show and want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm a huge believer in voice. It's natural, it's fast. I can talk faster than I can type. And it's a great way of making technology more accessible. I've been watching Voice Talks since the very first episode and have loved the content and the community. I'm really excited to be joining the show in this official capacity and share key insights from the voice industry with you all. One thing in particular that I love about the voice industry is that it's always evolving. And as we'll learn later in our show, this innovation is happening at a more rapid pace than ever before. During today's episode, we're going to take the pulse of the voice ecosystem. We'll get the latest data and insights from Vixen Labs' 2021 Voice Consumer Index, discover the top trends in voice from the summer, learn about the evolution of conversational AI, and much more. And I'm personally excited to sit down with Dr. Terry Fisher of the Voice Den later in the episode, where we delve into why voice is such a great interface. You won't want to miss it. First up, we have our keynote featuring James Poulter, CEO of Vixen Labs. James is going to share a few key findings from Vixen Labs' 2021 Voice Consumer Index. His team partnered with the Open Voice Network to survey 6,000 people from the US to the UK and Germany. And the consumer behavior insights they gleaned will drive voice innovation for years to come. Let's welcome James to the show to learn more.
Thanks so much, Megan, for the opportunity to be here and share this keynote with all of you Voice Talks watchers and listeners around the world. For those that don't know me, I'm James Poulter. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders here at Vixen Labs. And it's my pleasure that this afternoon, this morning, this evening, wherever you're watching, I'm going to be sharing with you some of our key insights from the most recent piece of research that we've launched in partnership with the Open Voice Network, which is the Voice Consumer Index 2021. So we undertook some research in the UK, the US, and Germany for the first time with 2,000 respondents in each country, making this one of the biggest voice surveys that's been conducted to date. And we want to do that particularly to also look at the behaviors that people have and attitudes that people have towards voice. And so we worked with our partners at the Open Voice Network, headed there by the folks like John Stein, and led a lot of our research by Scott and Susan Westwater from Pragmatic Digital, who lead the community and around conversational strategy there. And we did this in partnership with our research partners Delineate, who we've worked on a number of pieces of work with before. And the first thing I want to highlight in this is that voice is becoming a primary way that consumers will connect with the digital world and a primary way that marketeers can connect with consumers. And you can find a quote from John at the start of our research to that effect, that voice really is now becoming out of just the innovation channel, out of being that emerging platform into something much more established and becoming business as usual. Let's get into the data. The first thing that we found is that voice is now part of daily life for many. This isn't just some people using it some of the time. This is people using it multiple times a day. In all three of the countries that we studied, the US, the UK, and Germany, we found that over 50% of people are using voice at least once a month. But when you look at the daily usage, this is what gets really interesting. In all three markets, over 30% of people are using voice on a multiple times a day or at least once a day basis. And many, many more are using it once a week. In fact, actually, it's almost 50% of all of these markets are using voice at least once a week, which means that this is a really habitual use of voice, a much more evolved and advanced consumer than we necessarily expected. And they're using it across a range of different devices. What we looked at in the US, the UK, and Germany was what users see the value of voice in before they start doing more things. How do they start understanding what their voice device can do? And what we found is a much more advanced consumer than we were really expecting to find. The top box across all three countries is that when people are asked, how do you find out what you can do with your voice? It's trial and error, or I had a go. And this indicates a much more leaned in consumer, one that's willing to really experiment and try things. And I think it opens up many more possibilities on how we might engage with them. What's maybe more concerning for brands and marketeers is that there seems to be a lack of investment that we've known of for some time in marketing experiences before they actually get deployed. And we see this evidenced in what we saw as the lowest ranking of how people found out what they could do with their devices. When you think about a traditional marketing strategy of earned, paid, and owned media, the owned might be your voice application or your search results. But what about the earned and the paid? We found that when it came to things like reading consumer or tech news, blogs or reviews, or trying to find out what they could do with their assistant through those types of medium, typically what we might think of as earned media, that was the lowest of all the boxes. And only just above that was examples that have been shown in advertising such as TV, radio, and social media. We need to make finding a voice utterance or an invocation as commonplace as reading a website result or seeing a social icon at the bottom of a newsletter in your IVR script, or when you're speaking to a customer service agent in store. So our big headline takeaway from our first piece of the research was that 57% of people in the US, the UK, and Germany, they are voice assistant users, and that shows a very advanced consumer base that we think we can work with. On to our second section, which is looking at the ways in which people are actually using their voices today. What we see when we ask people where are they using their voice assistant around the home, and what was really striking from this question was just how important the phone is as an interface for voice interaction. And that we saw that in the most used use case for using their voice was at home on their phone in the US. And that gives us a very strong indication that we need to be thinking about the phone as a primary interface for voice and building multimodal experiences that work not only on smart speakers, but also on mobile devices, because the mobile device is also the gateway to other usage patterns as well. If we think about CarPlay and Android Auto, the phone is the thing that powers these experiences. But what I want to bring you to is now probably our most important finding for marketeers, brands, and businesses working with them. We know that for many years, this idea of the marketing funnel has been a pretty common parlance in all channels from the ages early, web and mobile and digital. But what we've wondered for some time is whether or not the marketing funnel, this idea of moving from awareness to engagement and consideration of a brand, moving forward to some kind of action, purchase, and loyalty, during which we see a big drop off, hence the funnel, is that something that actually rings true in the world of voice? And what we've seen is that it's alive and well, and actually much more so than we were expecting. So we asked people to rank the different types of things that they did with their voices. And we wanted to look at certain types of actions that really align to that marketing funnel, such as asking a question to a search engine, searching for information on products and services, for local business information, or finding about a brand, and ultimately making purchases. And what you can see from the results that we got is that this is an activity that is alive and well at all of these stages, that people are asking with their voices smart assistants general search questions. Those questions they may know or they may not know that they're asking a voice assistant, a search engine, whether or not these questions really exist, but whether they know it or not, they are asking them. And then gradually they go through the motions of asking more and more specific questions that mean that they might be asking for a specific type of product, ultimately then trying to find that product maybe locally or a business locally, for example, a retail outlet or a restaurant or a doctor's office or something like that. And then through to very specific information about actual brands. And if there's a route to, about 40% of them in all markets are willing to make purchases through their devices if they can do so, be that digital purchases, subscriptions, or potentially buying physical goods. And because this marketing funnel exists, it goes to show us how much more advanced this channel is becoming, and that we now believe that voice is a marketing channel that should be considered alongside things like mobile and the web. Now, if you want to find out more information about what else people are doing, I really encourage you to go read the white paper authored by Scott and Susan Westwater, and you can find that at the website just at www.vixenlabs.co/VCI. So what I want to end with is this big point that 91% of voice consumers, they're already searching via voice. This is now a commonplace, regular activity with the majority of publics in each of these different markets. And if you create an experience that they really value, they will go on to actually engage with voice. So that's the message we want to leave with you. But for now, thanks so much to Voice Talks for for the opportunity to contribute this keynote as part of this session. And I hope that you're all staying really well, and we'll see you in person again very soon.
Thanks, James. One takeaway from this research that really struck me is that users clearly see value in voice, yet they're primarily learning to use their devices through trial and error. This is pretty significant. It means that there are tons of unlocked experiences for users to explore, and that brands have a big opportunity to do more to support users. It's also clear that more and more people are integrating voice into their day-to-day lives, with 30% using voice daily. Last week, I read a blog post by Lillian Rincon, a senior director of product management for the Google Assistant team. Lillian described how the Assistant is core to her family's daily routine. For example, they use the Family Bell feature to remind them when it's time for dinner or of a task that the kids need to complete before they head out the door to school. As you might imagine, voice plays a big role in my house too. My husband and I use our Assistant-enabled devices to do simple things like turn off the lights or add things to the grocery list, to more complex tasks like helping us find a restaurant we want to try for dinner. I'd love to hear from the community on this. How do you use voice in your daily life? Drop a comment in the chat and let us know. This leads us to our next segment with Daniel Hill, Community Manager of Voice Brew. Daniel is going to highlight the latest trends in voice tech and voice commands. He'll also share a few bold predictions for where voice is headed in 2022. Let's hear from Daniel.
Thanks, Megan. I'm Daniel Hill, Community Manager at Voice Brew. I've been working in the voice space for a couple of years now. I'm very passionate about helping people to get the most out of new technology. I'm going to tell you about the top 5 trends that we're seeing in voice this summer, and I'll also give some tips and tricks and predict some future trends. Here are the top 5 trends that we're seeing in voice this summer. First, as people start to travel more and restrictions are eased, people are spending more time in the car. And we're seeing people use the voice assistant capabilities to do things like turn the car on before they get in, make sure the air conditioning is blasting before they get into the car. So this way they're stepping into a comfortable environment. The number 4 thing that we're seeing this summer is people using routines in order to turn devices on and off inside the house for cost savings. It doesn't make sense to keep the air conditioning blasting when you're not home, but maybe you want to turn it on about 30 minutes before you do get home. You could do that with a routine. We're also seeing people purchasing new devices instead of traveling. Maybe they're upgrading things within their home. Maybe they're buying some new appliances. And although they may not specifically be looking for voice-enabled devices, they're expecting the new devices that they have to be voice enabled so that when they get them home, they join those new appliances to their Wi-Fi network and they can control them using their voice assistant. People continuing their audio experience wherever they go. Maybe they wake up in the morning, start to listen to a podcast or an audiobook on their smart speaker. Then they get in the car, maybe they drive to work, and they expect that audio experience to continue from wherever they left off. Then maybe they go for a walk at lunchtime and they use their AirPods or earbuds and they continue in that same audiobook or podcast. And then when they get home, that same audiobook or podcast transfers exactly where they were in listening to their smart speaker so that they can listen to the rest. That's something that people are definitely using more of as they go out and travel. And the number 1 trend that we're seeing this summer is people purchasing voice devices for friends and family as gifts, as restrictions are starting to ease and people are traveling and visiting friends and family again. Now, let's go on to 3 commands that I'm seeing right now as trending. The first is remember where I parked. You can tell your voice assistant to remember where you've parked when you get out of the car. This way you don't have to think about it later. The second is in-car experiences. When you're spending time on the road, maybe you're on a road trip with family, playing a game like Song Quiz, which really gets everyone involved and makes the time you're traveling go much faster. The third trend that I'm seeing right now is teaching your voice assistant to say your name correctly. If you have a name that's very easy to mispronounce or people often mispronounce it and you're trying to correct them politely, you don't want your voice assistant to be saying your name wrong. 3 future trends that I'm predicting in voice is number 1, more personalization around people's preferences. People want to be able to determine how their smart speaker works, how it interacts with their other devices, and they want to be the ones to determine that, not necessarily the device manufacturer or developer. Another trend that I'm predicting in voice, number 2, is custom wake words. People may have a variety of different reasons for choosing different wake words. Maybe they have a family member or friend with a name that is similar to the device's wake word, and so they want to be able to customize it. People certainly should have that option. And the third trend that I'm predicting in voice is more full day audio experiences where you can continue to do the same things that you do at home, no matter where you are with what voice assistant happens to be nearby, whether you own that device or not. If you'd like to know more about trends in voice, tips and tricks, and what other things are coming, check out the Voice Brew newsletter at voicebrew.com. And you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Daniel Hill Media. Thanks so much, and back to you, Megan.
It's amazing to hear how voice users are adopting and advancing new trends in this space. I'm especially excited by the idea of better continuity of audio experiences across devices. As people start traveling again, fingers crossed, or even just commuting to and from their offices, there will be a huge opportunity to make that audio continuity more seamless. Many of these new capabilities we enjoy are thanks to innovators like our next guest, Joti Balani, founder and managing director of Freshriver.ai. Joti started Freshriver.ai a few years ago to help elevate the human condition with diverse and impactful AI products. Their work focuses on bringing diversity, inclusion, and ethics into voice products. Let's listen to how her team is already impacting consumers and Fortune 100 companies alike.
Thanks, Megan. Glad to be here. I'm Joti Balani, founder and managing director of Freshriver.ai and the founder of the New Jersey chapter of Women in Voice. The future of automation is here. Thanks to the pandemic, we are seeing it accelerate. I think recently we had a statistic that said we have basically converged 2 years of automation into 2 months. And a lot of that has been in the space of conversational AI, in particular in voice. Part of the changing of the old guard is what's at stake here. How do you move from the old systems into these new AI-enabled voice systems? The key is finding the right problems to solve with voice. There's a lot of business issues at stake here. It's a fantastic opportunity from an interface standpoint to leverage and create value for businesses. From a human analogy standpoint, I like to explain to people, if you think about an infant virtual being that has a brain, that has heart, that has memory, knowledge base, and also the senses, voice and touch, vision, we're seeing that too, soul machines being one of them, really are putting now a skin on top of it, right? Freckles and skin tone. Look how far we've come. The conversational AI adoption rate is growing really, really strong. There's the improvement in algorithms and machine learning models. The language models are improving as we deploy more of these systems out into the wild. But it needs the full human experience to be considered. If you think about the design and development framework, that is clearly important, but also equally important in targeting not just the top and bottom line of the business, it's diversity and ethics. We're seeing way too many failures in those spaces, which is why you need a more broader, more robust framework. This is the work that my team and I do with Fortune 100 enterprises. It's the thinking about, it's not just the AI, it's data and social sciences as well. How do you identify the right problem? We start with data to ensure that we are tackling the right problem, and our knowledge base on what voice can do for the business is really what we bring to bear. The virtual being that I mentioned earlier, if I were to continue the analogy, it really takes a village to raise this infant, going from everything from how you speak linguistically, and also the emotional intelligence pieces. I'm seeing way too many teams rushing into trying to make these systems into adults before they're ready, which also explains a lot of the high failure rates we've seen the last few years. So part of this is ensuring that these virtual beings are taken care of and they're fed. It is a long run game where you have to continuously improve and monitor. I want to share the framework at a very high level that we've been helping these Fortune 100 clients with successfully changing the old voice guard into the new, that are no longer serving the digital age that we all live in. Voice inherently, is a very powerful sense that humans use to communicate since the beginning of time. While technology has made it faster, better, cheaper, now there's a new factor at play that has to be considered in earnest, and that is emotional intelligence. If we are to move forward successfully in the conversational AI domain, we have to ensure we are considering that. Because this is for the first time ever, this is an interface unlike mobile and web, where the technology is coming to us. The machines have to understand how humans speak in order to successfully communicate and get things done. So part of the future of automation, which includes conversational AI, but there is a difference right here. And the difference is we have to consider the fact that we are a lonelier species. Voice offers that clear opportunity to reconnect. And that's how I get the clients to think about what voice does more than just the top and bottom line. The empathy part and the equity part are really important. And how do you do it at scale? And so we have to really educate the teams that work on these systems if we are to do this right. There is an incredible opportunity we have to create profits. And that's both of the capitalistic and the social kind. I think companies that are adopting this technology have a fantastic opportunity, including like the branding teams. I tell them this is one of the most exciting interfaces that you have at your disposal to build brand equity with your audience. But you have to be very careful, because if it's not done correctly, it can cause a lot of brand damage. So part of the examples I want to share with everyone is a Fortune 50 retailer that we recently helped move from an old IVR that was on its knees into the next generation conversational AI through this method, through the framework that we deploy. Is a really high stakes situation. We had a lot of support from the executives that showed a lot of courage. They empowered all the teams to make the decisions, to be able to experiment. And it took 4 months of sweat and tears and a lot of heart-pounding moments. But we were able to turn up a pilot production for the first set of stores that they now have rolled out into almost 2,000 stores in North America, which is very exciting. It's one of my favorite projects that I highlight, because a lot of good things came together culturally, technologically, operationally, and emotionally as well, relative to how the design was done. So the production pilot approach, what we have learned as we put this framework out working with clients, has worked very well from a mindset standpoint. The teams and the executive leadership support is critical. A strong framework that is communicated across the teams, so everybody's aware of what the expectations are, giving them the room to experiment and maneuver and pivot, doing a crawl, walk, run approach. Let's start small. You don't have to spend tons of money on this if you do it right. In closing, I want everybody to understand that there is an unlimited opportunity for voice to solve some real business problems that we have. More important than ever is getting this right. Doing it in smaller chunks. Part of my favorite pet peeve that I start with, as teams come to me and go, we've been doing this for 3 years. These FAQ bots are not working. People don't want to use them. They're bypassing it. And I say FAQ bots don't solve business problems on their own. They're just one part of the journey that helps solve the problem. What you have to do is extract the use case in a correct way. Define the success. What does that look like? Metrics. Ensure you've got all the right probes on this virtual infant to make sure that it is improving over time, because this is a long game. There's a lot to it, but it's very exciting. Really excited to be part of this movement, and also an opportunity here to share with all of you. And with that, Megan, back to you.
Thanks, Joti. I love this notion of including empathy and equity in the conversational AI framework. This reminds me a bit of our June episode of Voice Talks, where we heard how developers are focusing on inclusivity as they build for voice. It's encouraging because the more well-rounded these frameworks are, the better the resulting products and experiences will be. By the way, Joti is also the co-founder of the Women in Voice New Jersey chapter. We've heard about Women in Voice on previous episodes, and I happen to be a proud member of their organization. They held their inaugural summit just last month, where we heard from women just like Joti, who are mentoring and training the next generation of women in voice tech. They're just a wonderful mission-driven group. Now, as Joti and her team are rethinking the look and feel of automation, our next guest is leading the charge in rethinking the way we design conversation AI. Let's welcome Kane Simms, founder of VUX World.
Cheers, Megan. Appreciate that. I'm a big fan of Voice Talks, absolutely love the show, and I'm delighted to be here and speak to you about the future of conversation design and development. I'm Kane Simms of VUX World, and before we get to the future and where things are heading, it's important to really take stock of where we are right now. If we can define where we are, we've got a better grasp on where we might be heading in future. Now, if you've created conversational applications in the past, maybe you've designed an action for Google Assistant, maybe you've built a chatbot or another kind of voice bot, you might be familiar with this process here, and most of the kind of mature conversational design teams will have a process that looks a little bit like this. You'll start out with research. You're researching your user needs, you're researching what this thing ought to be, what use cases you should prioritize. That feeds into your requirements. What is it that the user needs? What is it that you can actually deliver? And then how have you got the infrastructure or the technology to be able to do that? That then leads you into the sample scripting and the role play phase, which is a bit like improv, which is quite fun, sitting back to back and role playing the conversation to try and find out those conversational patterns that you will use as the basis for your conversation design. Then you will move into prototyping and you will get a working example of a voice assistant or of a chatbot up and running that you can test and iterate with users. And then you will document that. And that documentation is usually in the shape of flows and scripts. Everyone's familiar with flows and scripts. And that defines how this thing works and what's going to happen. You'll then hand that over to a development team who will build it, code it, however that might be. Then there'll be some QA, and you'll move into the 3 L's, as I like to call them, the 3 L's of conversational AI. Launch, learn, and level up. You launch it, you understand what people are saying to it, how people are interacting with it, and then you change and you iterate over time. Now, at that really, if you were to put that process into practice, you will find yourself creating what would be known as a level 3 assistant. This is Raz's scale of conversational AI. You might have come across it. Level 1 is, I have to know how to use this bot or how to use this assistant. Think of that a little bit like the push button kind of chatbots that you used to see from years ago. Level 2 is getting a little bit better, but it's still predeterministic. It's still very much based on turn left, turn right, press 1, press 2, but it might be using natural language understanding. This is where a lot of the industry kind of is at the moment. It's in level 2. To get to level 3, you have to do a heck of a lot more user research. So that's the first thing that will either change or amplify in the role of conversation designers, developers, and conversational AI teams, is it will become a lot more focused on insight gathering and user research at the beginning, during the middle, and at the end of, not the end, because going live isn't the end, it's the beginning still, but while you're live, essentially. And that's how we're going to be able to create more sophisticated assistants. To get to this level 4 and level 5, this is where the assistant is able to anticipate user needs. It's able to help a user figure out what it is that they want. And in order to get to that, it's not just the design that needs to change, it's the technology that is changing as well. And I've got some good examples of technology that's pushing the boundaries in that respect as well. And so the promise and the nirvana for conversational AI, for conversational agents, is that they understand everything that we say. They understand our language so that we don't have to understand theirs or its. But that's very difficult to do. Understanding all the different ways that people say all of these different things is very challenging to do. And when you're designing a conversational application, there will be times when you don't understand what someone said. Google did this study, you might be familiar with it, I think it's from about 2018, and they found that there's 8,000 different ways that somebody can set an alarm on Google Assistant. 8,000 different ways. Now, if you were going to build an application that was, or an action that is an alarm-based action, you wouldn't have to define those 8,000 different ways of saying it, because Google's trained its models to be able to help you do that if you provide enough training data. But still, you're going to get curveballs. In all applications, you're going to get curveballs. This example again comes from Raza, which is an example of an airline bot that asks the question, are you traveling in economy? And the user responds with, unfortunately. Now, you can't just map that unfortunately to a yes intent, because later in the conversation, unfortunately, might not mean yes. And you can write a rule for that, but then if you keep on writing rules for these exceptions, you're going to end up with a very complex build on your hands. And so this is where the current intent-based NLUs start to break down a little bit. And there's examples of technologies, including Google Lambda, including Blooper, who are pushing the boundaries of intents, or of NLUs rather, moving away from intents. Because the intents force you into that flow-based logic, this kind of if this then that flows, which are fine if you're building something that's fairly straightforward, like a game or something like that. You can have those predeterministic flows, but conversations don't really work like that. Conversations don't have predefined journeys through them often, and as soon as you start to change things throughout a conversation, like if you order a pizza and then you want to change from a margarita to a ham and mushroom, but then you want to add extra pepperonis and actually not change the pepperonis, it starts to break down. It starts to get very complex to manage, because you're dealing with dialogue management and you're dealing with memory, all of which is a bit of a manual task at the moment. So you've got infinite complexity when it comes to these flows sometimes. They're very difficult to test as well. So what does that mean for conversation designers? Well, as we start to get more domain-specific NLU, we're going to start to see certain systems actually be able to manage the bulk of conversations. And so we're going to see that a conversation designer's job will become more about finding content, defining content, and writing content in a way that is fit for conversational consumption, because something that is being written to be read is different than something that's being written to be said. And so the conversation designer's job is going to become a lot more about content and copywriting and crafting that experience. And the technology itself is going to get better, which is going to help us move away from this flow-based logic. I mentioned Google Lambda, check that out, and Blooper as well. That just matches an utterance to a function. And so that's the other change in a conversation designer's job, is going to be, rather than defining flows, we're going to be defining outcomes and understanding and measuring how we're performing against those outcomes. And to help you think of a different way of designing conversations, Open Dialogue are doing some fantastic work to change that, to change the mental model about what it is to design a conversation, because conversations don't happen like this, if this then that, go here, go there. Conversations are a lot more fluid than that. And so Open Dialogue, basically it works on 4 core principles, which is you have a conversation, you have scenes, which is kind of like a sub-topic, if you like, of a conversation. You have turns, which is an exchange between a user and an assistant, and you have intents at the end. Notice that the intent comes last in this situation as opposed to first, as it does in this flow-based way of designing. What that means is, by structuring the conversation in this way, you're able to handle a lot more fluid conversations. Like in that pizza example, if I want to change my pizza order, I want to ask about delivery times, I want to get pricing information, and I'm hopping all around the conversation, what will happen at this intent level, if I say something that isn't recognized in that intent, is it will hop out to the turn to see whether this turn is a turn that should support that utterance. If not, it will hop out to the scene, excuse me, and it will say, is there a conversation happening in this scene that will enable me to fulfill that request? If not, it'll go to the conversation level and it'll say, is there a conversation to be had here about price changes? If there is, it will dip into that conversation, answer the question, but then it will return you automatically to where you left off in the conversation. That does away with all of this, if this then that rule-based memory management, which is incredibly exciting for conversation design. So the 3 things to leave you with, 4 things really, is that today, the one thing that conversation designers can do more of is user research. At the beginning, during the middle, and at the end of their projects, or in the live phase of their projects. As the NLU starts to get more domain specific, conversation designers will be defining and designing a lot more content rather than flows. As the technology improves, rather than flows, we'll be defining and analyzing outcomes and performance. And to move beyond flows and to help you get thinking about moving beyond flows, check out Open Dialogue and the way that it designs its conversations. It's definitely worth checking out. I'm Kane Simms of VUX World, and if you've enjoyed this, please do check out vux.world and /subscribe if you want to get all of our live podcasts and insights like this in your inbox every week.
I love the work that companies like Open Dialogue, Looper, and Google Lambda are doing to literally recast the framework of conversation design and solve this challenging problem of intent. As Kane mentions, our ability to design machines to listen better will unlock so much potential. Thanks again, Kane, for those insights. Now, on to our final guest. Dr. Terry Fisher is the creator and host of The Voice Den, an interactive voice reality show that is also the happy hour of voice. I had the pleasure of joining Terry on last night's episode of The Voice Den. Join us as we continue the conversation here.
Hi, Dr. Fisher. It's so great to see you again.
It's so great to see you again, Megan.
So I guess to kick off, could you tell our audience a little bit about your background in voice and the work that you've been doing in the ecosystem?
Sure. So my day job is actually as a physician. So I've got a little bit, I think, of a different story getting into voice. But when I think back as a kid, I've always been really interested in technology. I've always been really interested in education as well. Actually did an edu for medical school. And I also really love being creative and performing and doing things that involve getting on a stage and speaking. I've been a musician since I was 3, really. I played violin and drums. And I found this way to combine these passions of education, technology, and performing by hosting podcasts, by running the Voice Den, by educating people and being part of the community to help bring people together and to help people understand just how powerful voice is. So that's kind of my take into it. And I'd love to hear more about you and your take. How did you become the host of this show? It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, we're definitely going to need a musical performance at some point, maybe on a future episode.
I'm there.
Such a fascinating background. As for me, I actually kind of had my foray into voice when I joined Google just over 7 years ago, actually on the legal team. I started negotiating commercial agreements for several product areas at Google, and one of them was the Google Assistant team. And I got to do some cool negotiations for different things like bringing celebrity voices to the assistant and some other cool projects. And eventually I was like, that team, the business development team working with Assistant, is doing way cooler stuff than I am. And this voice stuff is just so fascinating. So it didn't take me too long to transfer over to that side so that I could really just dedicate to learning about the Google Assistant, familiarizing myself with the voice ecosystem more generally. And it kind of took off from there. And now I work with top global brands in the communication space like Snapchat and Zoom and others to launch really cool experiences with messaging and video calling using voice. So that's kind of where I've landed the last maybe 2 years or so. It's been so great, especially during the pandemic when all people want to do is really communicate with their loved ones and have that sense of community, exactly as you mentioned, that you foster with Voice Den. And it's been a huge pleasure. And also, I feel like I learn new things all the time. So that's one of the reasons, but I'm just so excited to be joining the show. Well, I would love to, as we're kind of talking about, our mutual interest in voice here, one thing that I know we've heard a bit about from this report out of Vixen Labs is the future of voice and different trends and things like that. And one thing I've noticed is that, there's more and more usage. We saw that in the report. We see that I think it said over 50% of people are using voice every week. And there's about 30% or so using it every day, which is so exciting. And I do think it's getting stickier and stickier as a behavior. I would love to see that continue as we build out more proactive and contextual voice capabilities. And I'm kind of curious, where you see voice headed.
I agree with you 100%. Ever since I got into this space a number of years ago now, I've been looking at voice and thinking about voice as the way of the future for people to interact with technology. And many people will be familiar with the way that we see evolution of technology, how it's gone from like a keyboard to a mouse to like a touch screen. And now the way we interface is through voice. So I've been thinking about this a lot. And I've come up with this campaign, this idea that voice is like our operating system. As human beings, that's how we generally communicate with the world. Yes, there's other ways, of course, but generally we use our voices to communicate first. And for the first time ever, technology is really kind of turning our interactions with it on, rather than having to learn new skills to interact with technology, whether it be learning how to type or use a mouse or use a touchscreen. The technology is learning how to communicate with us because of artificial intelligence. And this is only going to grow more and more and more. So I'm really excited about it. I mean, great work in that report that you referenced. They did a wonderful job. And I think it just shows the way we're going with voice. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you feel voice is like your operating system? Is that the way you tend to communicate with the world?
Absolutely. And I love that campaign that you kicked off, Voice is my OS. And you'll have to tell all the users who may not yet be familiar with it what that acronym of voice stands for, because you have a fabulous 5-word acronym that represents all of the facets of voice.
Sure. So yeah, as part of that Voice is my OS, I thought about like what makes voice so compelling. And there are 5 main reasons. And it just so happens that the letters of voice, VOICE, stand for those things. So V is versatile, right? We can multitask when we're talking, which is something that's different than typing or like you can't drive, for example, and text at the same time, but you could drive and have a conversation. O stands for omnipresent, right? It's sound, it's around us, it's everywhere. So someone could call my name from behind me and I'd be aware of that, which is like text or the written word. I, it's innate. The first thing we do when we're born as babies is we cry, we use our voices. C, it's contextual. You can hear emotion in people's voices. You know, how many times have you gotten an email where you thought, is this person trying to be funny? Are they being sarcastic? But you can tell that from the context of the way someone sounds. And E, it's efficient. We can communicate so much more information through our voice than you can, for example, when you're typing. And so VOICE, versatile, omnipresent, innate, contextual, efficient. That is why voice is so compelling. And actually, I've done this really fun thing that people want. They can look out for this. I've created little collector's cards of each of those letters, which are special NFTs. And if you collect the whole 5 collection, it opens up a special surprise.
I'm going to get right on that after we're done today. But I think that it's such a wonderful way to make all of the benefits of voice really accessible is with this great acronym that you created. So thanks for coming up with that for the community. And I think when I make one of those cards, I would say Voice is my OS because it allows me to fluidly interact with my devices without getting unnecessarily distracted by that technology. And I think that matters a lot to me in this day and age where we are surrounded by technology all of the time. I think with voice, I'm able to choose, when I want to interact with technology without having to be tethered to a physical device, either in my hand or right in front of me that I can tap. And it helps me have a little bit more of a more enjoyable life, a way of focusing more on the things that matter to me, instead of having to pull up my phone and maybe get distracted by social media or deep dive into my email inbox. I just have a task to complete. I can orchestrate it with voice kind of from a distance and go back to enjoying time with my family or whatever it is that I'm doing. And the list goes on from there, I think, as to the benefits. As you mentioned, it's kind of this unprecedented wealth of potential that we have in front of us. As you say, it's such a natural interface. And I think we have this capability in front of us that already is doing such an excellent job completing kind of basic tasks and being a little bit more transactional. And we see this ability in front of us to grow it into a more contextual and proactive interface. It's just so exciting.
Agreed, 100%, 100%. I think we're in for a very interesting couple of years. It's funny, I've said this before, but 100 years ago, there was a pandemic. And coming out of that, it was the roaring 20s. And here we are, 2020s, 100 years later, coming out of a pandemic. And we're going to have, I believe, an incredible time. Technology is going to be at the forefront of what we do. And I think voice is going to be leading the way.
So Terry, another great segment we heard was from Daniel of Voice Brew talking about the top trends that he's seeing in voice. I thought those were awesome. They really also resonated with me personally. I know there was a lot of routines of turning devices on and off to save, for example, and use of, with more time in the car, traveling, using voice. I'm curious if any of those trends resonated for you.
Well, certainly like different commands that are being used in the home. I love it when my family uses them in creative ways or comes up with creative ideas for them. And I'll give you one quick example, which I think is really fun. My daughter recently read the whole series of Harry Potter, and she's a big Harry Potter fan. So she has some smart lights in her room, and she decided she wanted to use some of the spells that they use in Harry Potter to control her lights. So I helped her, and we together created custom commands so that when she says one of the spells from Harry Potter, her lights turn on or they change color. And it's just a really fun thing for her to do, and we get a kick out of it.
Okay, I think we're going to see that exact use case skyrocket after this. I can't believe I haven't thought of it myself, but I know what I'm going to be doing tonight, and it's basically programming every light in our house. I have had such a great time talking with you, Terry. Thank you so much for coming on to the show, and you're welcome back anytime. We'll talk soon.
It's always such a treat to sit down with Terry, whether it's at the Voice Den or here on Voice Talks. He's well-informed and has this uncanny ability to simplify technical concepts into accessible and easy to digest language. His Voice is My OS campaign is a perfect example of that. I also really appreciate the community he's built with the Voice Den. It's a great balance of knowledge and fun. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank all of our guests, James, Daniel, Joti, Kane, and Terry, for taking the time to share their expertise as we continue to learn about this dynamic voice ecosystem. I hope you've soaked up as much amazing information as I have. Make sure you join us for our next episode on September 30th, where we'll be discussing conversational commerce. And in the meantime, connect with us on Twitter at VoiceTalksAI. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time.